Across the world, people have their housing costs taken away as much as half of their income. Have you ever thought of trying to change that? The good news is there is a way. House hacking is real, and we are here to show you how other people just like you have made it happen. Welcome to the House Hacking Podcast. And here is your host, house hacking expert, Andrew Kerr.
Welcome back, everyone, to Season 2 of the House Hacking Podcast. I am absolutely pumped to bring you this season. Now, if you recall back to Season 1, that was all about laying the groundwork for the first 5 of the 6 main styles of house hacking. Now, with this season, it's going to be all about the live and flip or slow flip style of house hacking and reducing your housing costs. Now, each episode this season, we really geared towards helping you learn about renovating and improving a property. Now, this is a critical skill to learn because, as any property owner can attest to, at some point, you're going to need to do some work on your property. And I want you to learn from experts that we have on the show this season, best practices, the best value for in renovating your property, and also working with contractors. Now, be sure to hit the subscribe button. That way you're going to get every episode of Season 2 as soon as it's released. And now for our kickoff episode, I was really excited because I was able to get Justin Hanna from the Real Estate Investing 365 podcast to come on the show. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about Justin. He's done multiple live-in flips, and he's done this not only while being married and having multiple kids. He's done it while working as a lineman and running a CrossFit gym with his wife and a partner. I mean, he has been absolutely killing it over the past decade, and he's got a really cool story today. You're going to hear about how he swapped houses to get out of a bad deal and to get into a better deal. So with that said, let's go ahead and bring him on. Justin, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm really glad you're able to come on. I mean, ever since I was on your show earlier in the year, as soon as we started talking, I knew I wanted to get you on for Season 2 of the House Hacking Podcast when we really dive into this sort of live and flip or slow flip scenario, because you and your wife have such a cool story and you've done it with a family. So again, thanks for being on. And where'd you call in from today?
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. Thanks for having me. I am currently sitting in Northern California while we're recording this, but what is today? Today is like July 9th. So I assume when this comes out, I'll be living in Idaho at the time, because actually we just signed papers this morning to sell our house and buy the new house. So we're moving this weekend.
Awesome. I remember when we talked beginning of the year, this was all in the works. So it's official now. Your place is sold and You're getting ready to move?
Yep. It's all loaded up, and we're just ready to hit the road Monday morning. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah, it's been like it keeps, for the longest time, you think it's months and months out, and all of a sudden it's here and you're like, oh, darn, we got a lot of stuff to do, but it's good. Yeah. We're excited.
Well, thanks for taking time out of this busy week before you moved to chat with me. And you also had a fitness studio. So did you end up selling that? Well, I remember the plan was you were thinking of selling it or possibly close it. So what happened with that?
Yeah, so we owned a CrossFit gym, but we had partners in it, and kind of the plan when we opened it was eventually to sell our half to them. But it was originally, we had thought to sell it, 3-4 years down the road, and it ended up being like just a year and a half into our partnership, which they were kind of surprised by, but it worked out well for us because we literally got the numbers and all the paperwork ready to go like right in the beginning of COVID. And so they ended up having to shut down for a long time. So for us, like financially, it worked out. But for them, I'm sure they'll make it work. But, it was perfect timing for us to just kind of step away. So yeah, we sold it and we're all free and clear.
Yeah. Well, I remember on Memorial Day that weekend, I remember seeing your Instagram photos with you and your wife. And your wife was several months pregnant doing the Murph Challenge, which blew me away. I mean, I can't even do it as is, but then your wife doing it while she was pregnant. I'm like, that's just amazing right there.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I think she was 5 months pregnant in May. And, she didn't wear a vest. Obviously, she's pregnant, but I wore a vest just because that's what you're supposed to do. And she beat me by like 6 minutes.
Awesome.
Do the whole thing, did all the pull-ups, all the push-ups. So anyways, she's crazy. I got to work out to keep up with her,
Awesome. And, this is just one of these other reasons for folks that are listening. We're going to get to the house hacking real estate stuff here. But one of the reasons I wanted to have Justin on is, real estate wasn't his whole world. He's using it as a tool to get ahead financially, but he's also been a successful business owner as well. So just wanted to add that little bit of flavor in there. So let's really get into your real estate story. I know you've done tons of live-in flips, but your most recent one in this property you just sold, because when you're moving, I'd love to just dive into this story because it's so cool how you sort of started with the property. You did a swap with a friend because it wasn't working. So let's just go right back to the beginning of that. And what year was that roughly when you bought that first property?
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of so like I mentioned earlier, we're just at the beginning of the show, we were moving to Idaho, like right now as we speak pretty much. We actually had moved to Idaho 3 years ago. And as soon as we moved there, we had to move back 6 months later, due to some family health. My mom, cancer, her husband got cancer, a bunch of stuff went on. So we ended up just like calling it quits and we turned around and moved right back. Well, when we moved back, right, there was very little on the market. This was 2.5 years ago, I guess we moved back. Very little on the market, hard to find a place. So my wife and I's idea is like, hey, let's find something with some property and we'll just add on and make it, what we need. So we found a piece of property in our hometown, which is actually very expensive. It's like a tourist area in Northern California and by Lake Tahoe. But we found 24 acres and it just had a 1-bedroom house on it. Well, at the time we had 3 kids. We still have 3. She's pregnant. So we had 3 kids in this 1-bedroom house. We're like, okay, well, we can kind of grind it out for 6 or 8 months. And then I can just hire friends that are contractors, do the framing, and I'll do like a lot of the finish work and try to add on to this house. And we'll have a nice piece of property. We bought the property for $379. And the property had been on the market for 2 years. Okay. So during a hot market in California, right? So that should have told you something, but our problem was there was absolutely 0 rentals because we live in a town of 2,000 people. There was no rentals available and the buying market was extremely limited. So we decided to buy the property. And then, shortly after we moved in and I started talking to my friends that were contractors and looking at plans and how much it was going to cost, we realized, well, this is going to cost at least $250,000 or $300,000 to just add on like 1,000 square feet.
Oh, wow.
That sounds ridiculous, but the reason is because the house we bought was like a concrete and steel, modern-ish looking house with the living quarters above the garage. And it was kind of on a slope. So in order to add on the extra square footage, it would have had to been like elevated, like California's regulation with adding sprinklers to the house and all this stuff that was going to have to be done. Just would have been a nightmare. So then we had to decide what else we were going to do that was going to be different than that. So do you want me to just keep going and tell this whole...
Well, let's stop there for a second. So, this sounds like a beautiful area. So beautiful small town, tourist area. Yeah. You find this 24-acre home. I know you, and I know you had real estate experience. So what's a good lesson learned that can come out of this? Did you do inspections and due diligence, but you didn't get bids? So you sort of got into it and realized it was way more work, or were you just more optimistic you could get it done quicker and cheaper?
Yeah, well, so as a lot of people know out there, when you're married and you have kids, you have like 2 sides of the story all the time.
Yeah.
So I was really kind of against buying this property to begin with. But again, there was a lot of stress and family drama going on at the time. We had to come back. So when we found this property and we looked at it, my wife, she grew up on some property with some animals and things. And then she's always wanted that for our kids. So she just kind of fell in love with the property. I liked it as well, but I just was thinking out of it numbers wise. I was like, man, this is going to be a pain. I was like, fine, we can figure it out. I'm going back to my job that makes really good money. I'll figure it out. And I always thought, because of my knowledge of the area, the other houses in our county that are on property, like anything over 5 acres, that's a nice house. It's selling for, $800,000-900,000 or more in our area. So I was like, oh man, this will be no problem, which hindsight, if you do the numbers, we could have still put 300 grand into it and still been ahead and made some money. The problem was going to be the timing, how long it was going to take, and just the risk of somebody not being able to buy in our area. And another little caveat there is once we got into this property, we were able to insure it with homeowners insurance right away and easily. But during the time that we lived there, we lived in this house for maybe 8 months. California had tons more wildfires, and they changed the wildfire insurance program to where big insurance companies weren't insuring properties in this area of our county. So the new insurance was going to have to be go from $1,200 a year to $6,500 a year just for this property. And so I was like, man, that's going to maybe take out some buyers. It might be harder to sell. I don't want to get stuck here. So the lesson is, work nicely with your wife, your significant other, but really try to figure out, the best option. And sometimes it's not. So again, the next segue to the story is that we had to become creative in order to make sure I could get out of this property in the long term, because we knew we were going to want to go back to Idaho. Eventually, we just didn't know when. We just wanted our family health issues to settle down. So,
yeah, I mean, your wife was sort of buying for the emotion and nostalgia of the kids, of her childhood, and then thinking about your kids, and then you're thinking the numbers in your head and roughly thinking about them. You're like, yeah, we can make this work, but not really drilling down in.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And especially because I know what's coming next. So, all right, you realize it was going to take a ton of work. It was going to be difficult, cost a lot of money. So how'd you decide to pivot with this property?
Yeah. So, I was constant state of stress while we lived in this house because, we were going back and forth with plans and my contractor friend. And, it was just like, gosh, I was just irritated all the time because it's just not going to work. So, from what I know in my other real estate investing, as you know, we have apartments and single family and all this stuff. Some of those deals have come from just talking to people, right? Just letting people know our situation. So we're in this house. We're not quite knowing what to do. We're thinking about putting it on the market, but we know it's sat for 2 years, and we were just the dummies that ended up buying it. That wasn't really an option. So come to find out, after talking to people, one of my longtime friends, he was a contractor as well, not the same guy that was going to do our work, but another contractor. And his uncle, just right across the highway from where our property was, so literally maybe half a mile away, his uncle owned a house for the last 20 years, but his uncle had moved to Hawaii. The house is kind of run down. It's like a big house. And the uncle didn't want to deal with it anymore. So the uncle gave my friend, kind of made a deal, said, hey, I'll sell you the house for $300. You fix it up, or $350. You fix it up, whatever you put into it and whatever you sell it for over $350, you can have. And so my buddy, being a contractor, and he's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So he gets the house under contract with his uncle for $350. He starts fixing it up. In the meantime, while we're in this other property, his business, he has equipment, excavators and, tractors and dump trucks and all this stuff. So we start to talk, and he's like, man, we really want some more property. I'm like, okay. He's like, I got this house I'm gonna have to sell soon. I'm like, okay. And so I'm like, hey, well, I got some property and we need a bigger house. So you want to work a deal? And he's like, he comes and looks at it. He's like, oh yeah. Cause since he is a general contractor himself, this big project of adding onto the house wouldn't be as intense for him because he can do it all. He has guys, workers and stuff. So in the long story short, we end up making a deal to where we're going to trade properties. So he gets this house to a certain point where it's lendable, right? Because it was kind of in really rough shape. So he fixes the HVAC and the heating system, everything like that, makes it lendable. We trade him the house. He gets a loan for the property for the same price what we bought it for, $379. So we didn't, we only lost living expenses living in that house. We didn't really lose too much other stuff, but we're going to have to pay that anyways. And then we buy his house for $500,000, the property that he gets. So he still made a good profit because he fixed up some of it, but it wasn't completely done. So my thought is, hey, this will be a good opportunity to kind of take up where his house hacking or his renovations left off. And then we'll see what happens in the future. So that was a big stress relief for sure.
All right. So a couple of things in there. I loved how the fact that you were just like, oh, I started talking with folks, and then all of a sudden I came across someone that actually needed what I have and I needed what they had. And you ended up essentially switching properties. I mean, you officially did a sale and a purchase and all that good stuff. But I mean, this is why I think networking is so powerful if you're going to be in real estate, or even if you don't want to do real estate and you just want to do a live and flip once to get some money to pay off debt, or you want a house hack for a couple of years to get ahead financially. You really have to expand your network and really learn about other folks and what they're needing. And there's a great way to potentially come across a deal. I know I've gotten tons of deals from property managers and other real estate investors where it was still a good deal, but it wasn't quite a good fit for them. So I love that. And then, one thing you mentioned there I want to call out is you said he did some work because the bank wouldn't lend on it in the condition that it was in. So could you just expand on that for us a little bit?
Yeah. So his uncle had the property for sale for several years, right? And he had renters in it. And there's one thing that had happened in California, a lot of people know, is that they made marijuana legal out here. And so whether you were growing legally or not, people were just doing it everywhere. So one of the people that ended up renting this house from his uncle prior to him taking it over was growing in the basement area, and so they kind of really trashed it. Like the windows were taken out, they redirected the HVAC for ventilation. The deck was falling apart. Like it really just wasn't in a condition that the lenders were willing to lend on it. So, he came in and made it to where we can get our loan on it, because we didn't want to pay $500,000 cash for this property. So luckily he brought it kind of up to snuff. And what he ended up doing was he remodeled most of the inside of the house. For the most part, he didn't do everything, but he did refinish the floors, new painting, refinished all the cabinets, new vanities and stuff in the bathrooms, countertops, carpet and things like that. It was what he did. So it was ready, but the outside of the house was still absolutely trashed.
Yeah.
And so why I really thought that this house had more potential above the 500 was because the house was still on a little bit of property. It's on 3.5 acres. It's a 5-bed, 2.5 bath, with an office, 3,200 square foot house and a 1,200 square foot unfinished basement area. So it's a really big house in Northern California in our town, you know what I mean? That's touristy. So I knew that it still had room above that 500,000.
Yeah, that's awesome. So why did you want to go with traditional financing versus getting hard money lending?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, because, I can still qualify for it. At the time, I think I had 1, 2, 3, 4. I only had 5 loans, like property loans on my name. So this would have been a 6th loan. And, I'm sure some of your listeners have heard, but if they haven't, there's like conventional Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac guidelines say kind of once you get to like 10 loans per applicant, and me and my wife always buy everything together. So we're kind of limited to 10 on their underwriting guidelines. Since we still have that option to have a standard conventional loan, the rates are lower. You don't have to pay as many points. We only put 10% down on the property. So it kind of worked out. I didn't want to pay all the extra fees and costs for hard money.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Because you could do that conventional. All right. So you bought the house for $500,000, you put 10% down. The exterior needed some work. It had some potential with that unfinished basement. So how long total were you in that property? And then let's start to talk about some of the work that you did.
Yeah. Okay. So again, so everybody knows this house also was not my ideal house to live in. The only reason I even got into this house was to get out of the other house that I made a bad decision to go into in the first place. Okay. So it was kind of like just making these huge moves for our family and putting us in these different houses just because strictly we had to move back from Idaho. So we had to find a place. We got into a place we didn't like, that was horrible, wasn't going to work out. So I decided to find something to take away from that. I moved into this house, which I didn't like because it was way too expensive. And, as you know, like I mentioned, we do like to buy other properties, and this was going to take up much of our capital and time and just, work that we're going to have to do. So just to reiterate, I didn't want to be in this house either, but we had to make do with what situation we had. So, what we ended up doing was we kind of cleaned up the basement and made it kind of like a work area downstairs. We didn't want to end up finishing it because I just felt like that was like, you kind of want to leave a little meat on the bone for the next buyer, right? So if somebody is coming up from the Bay Area in California and seeing the house, or like they see the unfinished, it gets their mind flowing to think, oh, what could we do? Game room or a theater or something like this. So we just kind of cleaned it up, put some walls back in, made it kind of like a work area, / shop and like enclosed storage area. So we kind of cleaned that up. What had to happen on the outside though was the house had a lot of drainage issues because the house is built on a hill, right?
Okay.
So the back of the house is like 30 feet off the ground, and the front is flat to our our front yard. Well, there's a ton of drainage issues because the concrete was all broke. It was built in 91, which isn't old, but it wasn't like built very well. So we had to address the outside. So the main work that we ended up doing was we ripped out a bunch of driveway, maybe like 3,000 square feet of driveway. It's a big horseshoe driveway. And then we added a pad off to the side. We ended up pouring about 60 yards of concrete for a new driveway. We poured 300 feet of retaining wall around the front of the house and then against the lawn in the front yard. And then we ended up building a shed, like a second garage. It's bigger than a shed. It's like 16 by 20 that we built on the side. So it really gave the front like a much nicer look, fixed all the drainage issues. We had to do some exterior repairs, some siding, some warping, some different things on the outside that was really, they call them Section 1 termite clearances that really have to be fixed. We ended up fixing a lot of that, refinishing the deck. And after all it's said and done, I think we ended up because I did most of the work myself, just with friends' help. Luckily, I have the ability to do that. So I think it cost us about $39,000 or $40,000 in material.
Okay.
Then I had my time, but luckily I didn't really have to pay for my time. My friends, they just buy them some beer and pizza on the weekends and they come help me out, So yeah, we didn't have to put too much into it, but it was definitely a lot of work. Definitely like 5 solid months of work.
So you're doing this work while also running the CrossFit gym with partners and raising a family.
Yeah. And then I work full time. I'm a lineman by trade. So I work on power lines. So working just in between that schedule. So yeah, it gets busy. And then we also have a nutrition coaching company. Then our rental property, we have 12 rentals out in Idaho. I mean, but you got to do what you got to do. Because if not, we knew our goal was to end up moving again back to Idaho. Yeah. So we had to get it fixed, and we just weren't sure at the time when we were going to move, but we just was like, hey, let's get it done sooner rather than later.
So, a lot of folks say, I can't do real estate, or I can't house hack, or I don't want to do a live and flip because I have a family, and they sort of use that as an excuse. And I love how you sort of said, I got in this bad deal, and I did this to get our family further ahead, and you managed to do that through. And I know you've done other live and flips, and you've done that with a family. I mean, do you have any advice for folks that have kids or have a spouse that they have to convince to go through this process? I mean, do you feel it's like negatively impacted your family's quality of life, or has it helped improved it? Or just give us a little information on that. Yeah.
So, it is definitely hard with the family, and there's people out there that take it to even farther extreme where they live in, they have a huge renovation on the interior and exterior, or it's even like a duplex or a fourplex. I'm not really willing to go that far to like live in like a joint house, like a duplex or something with the kids, just because we have 3 kids, a 4th one on the way. But there's definitely people out there that are willing to do that. So it's kind of, for one, it's up to your tolerance of what you're willing to put up with. For 2, you and your spouse really kind of need to be on the same page, or one of the spouses, like for me, my wife's definitely, whatever I want to do with real estate or the houses, she's like, yeah, go ahead, whatever. She's not really involved in the business of like making the money or making the investment decisions, but she's real supportive in whatever I want to do, because to her, I've kind of like proved what we can do so far. And so she's just on board. So either both of you guys need to be involved in the business and supporting each other, or you need to have the support of your spouse to do whatever you need to do, because it's going to get stressful, for us, we had a dirt driveway with little kids and the dirt coming in, and then concrete, and then all the exterior siding work and the banging, the baby trying to sleep, just all the time for months and months and months on end. So it takes a toll, but, first you got to decide that. And then the next is just like, you need to figure out where you want to go. You know, I think right now in society, so much crazy stuff is going on. So many people just think, oh, well, I want to be rich someday, or I want to get to where I want to go. And it'll just happen as long as I just keep positive attitude and just like, you know, think about it a lot. And maybe it works. It's like The Secret, that book, The Secret or whatever. Maybe it really works. I don't know. But I do know in between the time, you need to make the tough decisions and do the work to get yourself to where you want to go. You know what I mean? Because like example, like we're leaving right now and I'm quitting my job, but we have enough passive income that covers all our bills that I've been able to save up over the last 10 years of my real estate investing. So I'm not going to be rich, you know, making 50 grand a month, but I'm making enough to pay our bills to where I don't have to be so stressed out to like make extra money for the family. So you just have to be willing to like grind it out and like do some hard work.
I love that. So, I mean, I really think mindset is a big part of being successful, but you just can't have the mindset and dream about it. Like do your vision board if that works for you, but then you actually have to go out and physically do the work, grind through it and get it done. And I loved how you did that with being a lineman, having the gym, doing nutrition, having the other real estate properties, raising the family, and doing this work on your own, man. It's killer story. All right. So you bought it for $500,000, you put 40 grand into it, and you just sold it, signed your paperwork here this morning. So what'd you end up selling it for?
So we listed it for $679, and I was like, okay, sweet. We're going to make quite a bit on this. You know, I was like pretty happy.
And did you list it yourself or did you hire a realtor?
My wife listed it. So she's an agent also on the side. So she might sell 5-6 houses a year. Doesn't do a lot, but just enough to make some extra money. So we list ourselves for $679. Well, we listed it in February. Well, everybody knows what happened as soon as like into February, March, COVID hit. And then pretty much throughout March, they didn't even allow any showings. We lowered it to $629, like maybe 3 weeks after we first listed it, just to try to get some interest. And then no interest happened just because everybody's afraid, especially in California. Nobody wants to go out and see properties. So our plan was this summer to move to Idaho. Okay. We knew we needed to make that happen, but when you have a family, you know, you need a place to go to, and I wasn't going to be working anymore. So our mortgage on this place is $3,000 a month. So I'm like, well, I don't want to be stuck. So what we ended up doing is just slashing the price again to $599. And literally as soon as we did that, COVID opened up and we got a full price offer, like within a week of that market opening up. The offer though was contingent on the people selling their house in the Bay Area. So they had to sell their house first, which there was some more COVID restrictions down there. So it kind of extended. So I think we ended up having like a 70-day escrow, which we were fine with because we had to find a place to live up there and all that stuff. So $599 with a $12,000 credit. So that brings us to $587. And then I think what we're getting back, you know, we owe $435 on it right now. We'll get a check at closing for like $115 is what we're getting. So if you calculate it, we put 10% down, put 40 into it. We really only ended up making, you know, 25,000 plus my wife's commission. She'll get a check for like 10 grand or something. So maybe 35 grand over just almost exactly 2 years, which isn't great. You know what I mean? But again, looking at this situation, like I said, we didn't want to be here or the last house or move back from Idaho. And then dealing with Corona, I really didn't want to get stuck in the house. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 to 8 months. So we probably could end up selling it in the mid sixes. I think these people got a great deal on the house.
Yeah, it would have been different if you were staying in California, right? It's like, okay, great. We'll just take it off the market and we'll wait to see that happens in another 6 months. But because you're moving across state, I'm right there with you. Let's sell it and get out. And I mean, while $35,000 over 2 years isn't killer, for a lot of folks, 30 grand is pretty life-changing. Pays off that student loan, pays off, that fancy car that they bought that now because of COVID's been sitting in the driveway for 4 months and hasn't been used at all. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things, you went from a really bad deal and were able to turn it around into a slightly better deal. So you still walked away from money. And I think the great lesson here, it really is real estate doesn't go as planned. And if you're going to do this sort of live and flip, you got to figure it out. I mean, you could have even if you have a great plan and you do your due diligence and your bids perfectly, it still doesn't go great. But even if you make some mistakes early on, you can pivot and you can switch and you can still come out making a little bit of money. And you did that perfectly while doing all this other stuff, raising the family, the job, gym. So man, kudos to you. That's killer that you guys are able to pull that off and still walk away with, 35 grand in cash.
Yeah. And, that's tax free because we is a primary residence and we kind of planned it exactly. I think we're like a month and a half past our 2-year date, the closing today, so that was kind of the whole plan all along to just like wait for exactly this 2 years. Once we decided when we were going to go back. And so it ended up working out, 35 grand after taxes. If you're going to pay, have taxes on that, that's 60 grand of income.
Yeah.
That you get post-tax. So yeah, it's not too bad, better than losing money. That's for sure.
35 grand is a lot of time outside and in rain, snow, or in the sun working as a lineman. My uncle's a lineman up in Michigan and he loves the work, but he goes, some days it's really tough, long 12-hour days. So yeah, man, that's awesome. So I really appreciate you coming on again to share your story with us about this little live and flip. And again, I love the fact that it didn't work out perfectly and you pivoted along the way and you came out ahead. But before we let you go, we like to ask all of our guests a final set of 6 questions. Are you ready for them?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
The famous 6.
All right. So number 1, what is your favorite personal finance blog, book, or podcast that you've read or listened to recently?
Okay. So I don't honestly listen to a lot of like finance blogs podcasts. I hardly read ever. I just listen to things, whether it's audiobooks or podcasts. But the podcast that I would say most relates to this, which I think is great overall your whole life, is Andy Frisella. He's kind of like a self-made businessman. He has like $1 billion, several companies, $1 billion corporation that he's made from scratch, and his podcast is called Real AF. And it's more down to earth, kind of work your butt off. Don't be a little bee. He kind of gets into, you just need to grind it out and get to where you want to go. Cause he's been in business for 20 years. The first 10 years of his life, in 10 years accumulative, he made $56,000 in his business. Oh, wow. In 10 years. Yeah. Second 10 years, his net worth is like 150 million now, right? Like his personal net worth. So it's just like sticking with it and not giving up. So
awesome. I'll have to check that one out. All right. Yeah. So number 2 on the list, what is your favorite real estate related blog, book, or podcast? And I know that you have several of these that you listen to. So
Yeah, I have a bunch. I would say, I would plug my own podcast, but honestly, I don't listen to it. So the one I listen to the most for real estate has probably just got to be Bigger Pockets. Either that or actually, I really like the Old Dogs podcast, Old Dogs Real Estate Network, with Bill Manacero. It's kind of geared towards older generation wanting to like retire, get out of, or supplement the retirement with the real estate. But I listen to it as well because if those people are trying, that age demographics trying to get out of retirement or supplement it quickly, well, I want to do it quickly too. So it kind of like relates to myself,
Awesome. I'll have to check that one out as well. So, all right. Number 3, what is your favorite travel destination you've been to so far?
So I've never been out of the country, but we have done some traveling inside the United States. Been to a bunch of states, and our favorite is, I think, Zion or Utah, like the national park system in Utah. That was just an amazing trip. We went to Lake Powell, Utah, or Zion, traveled, went boating, all kinds of stuff. So that was great. Zion's like the best.
Very cool. All right. So the 4th question, this is one we had all the way through the first season of the podcast. I kept it in here. I know we're in the middle of the COVID crisis, but once the world opens back up again, what's next on your travel or vacation list?
Well, since I'm kind of going into a whole new career path and quitting my job and go full time in real estate right now, I think traveling is probably going to be limited for a couple of years because hopefully I'll just be working 7 days a week. It's kind of what I want to do. But when we do travel, my wife and I would really love to take like a trip to like Switzerland, that kind of part of Europe, up in the Alps, like northern Italy. and just spend maybe a couple, 2-3 weeks over there without the kids, just me and my wife. Because we never really got a honeymoon era because we had kid right away. So we want to do that just by ourselves.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be a beautiful area. All right. So number 5, what's the biggest bucket list item that you haven't accomplished yet?
This one's kind of difficult for me to think about because I kind of try to do whatever I want. I'm kind of so focused on just getting to where I want to go that I probably need to stop a little bit and smell the roses. But I would say the bucket list thing is probably just the travel. I've never been out of the country. I'd really like to take time with my wife, just me and her. I mean, the kids as well, but with a hectic life. So it's probably a European travel trip is something, that bucket list thing that I'm really looking forward to.
Awesome. Well, hey, whenever you start planning that trip, let me know. We love traveling. We'll definitely give you some great recommendations of places to go and see and that are perfect for couples.
Yeah, you're the man. You've been all over.
Yeah. All right. So number 6, and the final question is, what is your favorite life hack?
So my favorite life hack is this. Okay, 99% of people that hear this will not do it. But again, I bring it back to Andy Frisella and his podcast, Real AF. He had a podcast before that called the MF CEO Project. He has a program called 75 Hard. Okay, 75 Hard is a 75-day. It's actually a whole year-long program, but the first phase of it is 75-day challenge, where you do 2 workouts a day, drink a gallon of water, take a picture of yourself every day. Your diet is on point, not even one M&M for 75 days off your diet, what you want. And then, take a progress picture of yourself every day. Oh, and read 10 pages of a business or motivational type book. So there's those 5 things that you have to do every day for 75 days. Doesn't sound that hard until you get about 20 days in. You've worked out 2 times a day for an hour each time and you got to read, can't eat whatever you want. You got to track your calories and track your food, whatever. It's extremely hard. But what happens during the 75 days is you feel like you're on fire and there's nothing you can't do. You start clicking things off. Your mind's working better. You feel so motivated. No matter what you want to get done, you're getting it done. That is by far the number 1 life hack I've ever heard of or ever experienced. I've done it twice. And it'll change your life forever. If any of your listeners want to do that, look up Andy Frisella, 75 Hard.
I might have to go check that out. It's pretty awesome. I mean, it's what that happens in a lot of different areas in life. I mean, it's what the military does when folks come into boot camp. You come in and you grind it out nonstop to do this big transformation. I love it. Fighters do that where, that leading 30, 60, 90 days before a fight, that's their whole world, all intense to get to that. And I love it. You just focus on this 75 days to make this huge transformation. And then all of a sudden you got these habits that are there now. Cutting back to 1 workout a day, you're like, this is easy. I was doing 2 workouts a day. So I'm going to check that out. I don't know if I'm going to quite do it, but it's definitely really interesting. So really awesome that you did it twice. Justin, thank you again for being on the show. If folks want to look you up, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me. I have a podcast, Real Estate Investing 365 podcasts. Just type my name, Justin Hannah, Hannah. Instagram, justin.hannah365 on Instagram. And then my website is realestateinvesting365.co. That's CO.
Awesome. And we'll put all of that in the show notes for folks. That way they can find it. Justin, thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the House Hacking Podcast. For more up-to-date information on house hacking, to access links and resources mentioned in today's show, and connect with a guest and host, head over to www.fibrei.com. That's www.fibrei.com, where your house hacking journey begins.
Folks, thank you so much for joining us today for the kickoff episode of Season 2. Now be sure to tune in next week because we have an absolutely amazing female entrepreneur, house hacker, and professional full-time flipper coming on the show, and you're going to want to not miss that episode.